So for this project, you're going to want to start with 6 strips of 5-inch wide by 44 or 45-inch long pieces. And you can either have them be totally random or have them color coordinate in some way. I've kind of done a little spin on a triad color scheme. And I found this fabric that is going to be the liner of the bag. So I pulled some of the colors out of this fabric from the liner, and they will be on the outside. Okay, so all the pieces will be the same size, 5 inches wide by 44 inches or 45 inches long. Okay, I've got the fabrics paired up, and now I'm going to take each one of the pairs and I am going to take them, lay them right sides together, and then I will, oops, yeah, that's the right side, kind of hard to tell. I'll lay them right sides together, and then I'm going to go stitch a 1/4 inch seam along one side, and I'll do that on all 3 sets. Right sides together, 1/4 inch seam, all the way down one long side. Change the machine to a 2, which moves the needle to a center position, and then we will have a 1/4 inch seam when we line the fabric up with the right edge of the presser foot. We will keep the machine on a 2 for this entire project. For this entire project, we want the needle in the center, including when we are quilting later on in the steps with the fusible fleece attached. On all steps, we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam, so we're going to keep our machine at a 2. All right, next we need to make sure we trim up all loose threads just to keep everything nice and clean. And then you're going to take all 3 strips and you are going to press the seam open. Okay, so this is the great debate of quilting. Do you press to the dark side, or do you press open? For this project, it is best to quilt the seams, or press the seams open. So we'll just do that on all 3 of the long sewn strips. All right, I've got all the seams pressed open on all 3 of the pieces. So you've got 6 strips of fabric all sewn into pairs with the seams pressed open. Next, we are going to cut the pieces into 5-inch wide sections. Right, I'm going to show 2 ways how to do this next part. So if you are on your own at home making this project and you have a mat and a rotary cutter and a ruler, that's the best and easiest way to do this. You will want to trim off your selvages, and when we sewed at a 2 on our stitch length, so it's a little bit of a shorter stitch than the standard, and that just helps us to avoid many stitches coming apart when you cut them. So I'm going to trim off my selvages, and then I'll just discard that, and then I'm going to slide my ruler down 5 inches. And you do want to make sure when you've pressed your seam open that there's no crease right here, that it's laying perfectly flat, and you just line it up with the 5-inch and go ahead and cut that, and just repeat that process all the way down this strip. So you'll end up with, I'm not sure how many pieces we'll get out of it, but from this row they'll all look like that. Okay, so that's what you do if you are at home or if you have a rotary blade and a mat to cut with. So if you do not have a rotary cutter available, what I would suggest doing is making some kind of a template. Now, if I had a bigger piece of cardboard, I would just make a 5-inch wide piece that fit the whole length of this, but I don't. So this is just a piece of cardboard that was inside of a fat quarter. And so what I've done is I folded under one edge to make it exactly 5 inches across here. So I'm going to line this edge, which is just not quite 5 inches, but I'm going to line it up perfectly even with the edge over here. Okay. And then the reason I drew a line across here is just to remind myself that this is 5 inches across. That's the side. Then I'm just going to take my marker and I'm going to draw my line going up. I'm going to repeat the same thing right here. Okay, draw my line. And what I'm going to do when I'm cutting is I'm going to cut close to the right side of that line. So the line is a little bit wide just because the marker itself has a little bit of width to it. And so when I'm cutting my piece, I'm going to cut on the right side of the marker. So most of the marker line will end up on the next piece. Okay, so if that is how you have to do it, the process will take you a little bit longer, but you do want to take your time to do it evenly so that all of your pieces end up exactly the same size. So you would just repeat the process, take that one, set it off to the side, and then for the next one, again, you would just line the side of the card up over with the edge, draw in your line, repeat over here, and then you would Now you finally have all your pieces cut. You should have 8 of each set. So I'm going to walk you through the process of laying out the bag. So this was the original pattern that I had. It called for just individual 5-inch squares. So what I did was I converted the pattern to the 2 strips sewn together that you cut into 5-inch strips just to save time so you're not sewing so many individual squares. With that though, it takes away some of your freedom of just putting the squares randomly all over. So this is kind of the shape that we're looking for, and I'm going to show you what I ended up doing to lay out one of the sides. And I hope to make this as easy as possible for you and with as little confusion as possible. So I made this little chart. First of all, over here I've got all of the pieces labeled. So this is an entire set of pieces, and I've got them labeled A, B, this set C, D, and this set's E and F. And so then on my chart, I've drawn in here the front, what the front panel of the bag would look like, and what the back panel would look like. So I just drew in the numbers, and I actually laid my pieces all out to make sure I liked how they look, but only on one side. So I laid out the front, and it went A, C, E, A, C, E, okay, across the top row. So then my next row, I want to alternate it, change it into something. Oh, well, it's kind of set because it's the other half of the section. So it goes B, D, F, and then B, D, F. Then my next row, because I have already sewn my strips together, I actually only need, on the end piece, I only need 1 square instead of the set. So right now I have that just folded under, and I will end up later going back and ripping that seam out. That is the unfortunate part of sewing the strips. Had I thought about it in the beginning, I could have cut 5 inches off the end before pinning them and sewing them, but I didn't think about it. So that needs to just be a single square right there, and that was E. And so then this row will go E, A, C, E, A, C. And then again at the end, let me take you over there. At the end of that row, I only need 1 single square. So on this one also, I've got it folded under, and I will go back and rip those seams out and take them out. And then on my bottom row, you are going to indent 1. So you're going to not have a square on this end. And then you would have B, D, F, B. This row right here And I've even made a note on the paper that you won't really see this too well. It's on the bottom. Okay, so I have a gold one and the gold one here. They're on the ends. That's really okay. Okay, so then if you'll notice on the chart, the back side is an exact duplicate of the front. So it's exactly the same. But what you need to look at is right here. These two sides. So when I lay this, basically I'd be taking this whole finished panel and I would lay it right sides together on top of this one. I want to look at this square and this one and make sure that they are different, that this one and this one are different, and that this one and this one are different. Then I want to look at this column right here because it would be flipped over all the way to this side. So I want to look at A and E, B and F, E and C. And I want to make sure that those are different. And the reason is because that is going to be the side of the bag. And so just it looks a little bit nicer if those aren't exactly the same. If you wanted them to be the same, actually, if you made all of them the same, then it could look really fine. But it's basically this side panel that we're looking at. And again, if you look at this picture here of the finished bag, you cannot see the bottom at all. So it is the one I worry about the least. Okay, so you probably want to take some time, think about what you want to do for the layout. This is what I am going to go with. So now I do have to rip out 4 seams total because I'll have to rip out this seam on 2 different pieces and that other yellow flower one on 2 different pieces, but I'm okay with that to end up with the final product that I really like. Do yourself a huge favor now. Once you have your pieces all laid out just how you like them, take a picture because it is very likely that you will forget unless you're doing this all at one time. Even with the chart drawn out, like now I have the letters on each of my pieces, but in a second I'm going to clear those letters off, so the chart is pretty much useless if I can't go back and look at a reference to see what each of the letters was on. So take a picture and go back and look at it whenever you need to as you're sewing the pieces together. All right, I'm going to clear my letters off here, and then I am going to stack rows up at a time. So I'm going to start here and just lay this one on top, then this one, and then this one, and then this one. I'm going to kind of stagger over here, and then this one I'm going to lay right sides together. And I'm going to put my finger right here just to remind myself, okay, I want to sew the seam on this side, attach those. And I will probably put a pin in, got it right here, just to remind me that those are the first pieces that I am sewing together. Okay, so then the next time I'm going to start right here and lay this on top of this, on top of this, keep moving it. And then when I get to this one, I'm going to lay this piece right sides together. And I will probably remember that that's the outside piece since it's the single. But now that just kind of allows me to have everything laid out in nice stacks before I sew them together. So the most attention I want to focus on is on the center of the square. So I want to make sure that those the pieces where they're attached and I'd pressed open, I want to make sure that is straight and even. And then I'm going to put a pin in right there. Depending on your skill level with sewing, you might also want to come down here after you've pinned the center. Always pin the center first. But then you could come and put a pin in down here and another one down here. I am not going to do that. I'm just going to sew, but I am going to pin the center of all mine, just because to me that's the most important spot that you want to make sure is lined up. And for all of these, we're going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so I've got my first pieces sewn together, 1/4 inch seam. I'm just going to open them up and look at them, and they look pretty nice, pretty straight and even. So I'm going to just go back and look at my picture to see if I have my piece laid out. One more idea is to, if you don't want to keep opening up your phone to look at a picture, is just to print a picture of what your plan is so that you can have it right by your machine and hopefully not make any mistakes of putting the wrong strip on the wrong side as you're sewing them together. Now you have the finished piece, the finished front. All the pieces are sewn together, except for the two sections are not attached yet. So what we're going to do next, we're going to take one piece at a time and press the seams open. So you'll go in, flip it over on the wrong side, and you'll just take each of the seams just like you did when you were very first starting out on the project, when you were sewing those strips together, and you'll just press the seam open like this, and this will just make things a lot nicer, neater. It looks really pretty even on the back, and things will just go together nicer, and it'll lay a lot smoother if you do press them all open. So we'll do all the pressing open before we attach the two pieces together. One thing that has happened is at some point my red squares here got a little bit taller than the others. So what I need to do is I need to just come in and trim them down just a little bit. I noticed it right from the beginning. I should have trimmed them before I even sewed all my pieces together. But what I'm going to do is just trim down a little bit of that orange, or that kind of reddish square, just so that it is straight across the top. It'll make that easier for me to line up my pieces when I'm putting the two pieces together. We're finished now with the front of the bag with the two sections. I've trimmed them up, pressed the seams open, and now I'm just going to take this top half and I'm going to fold it over and lay it right sides together with the bottom half. And then I'm going to go in, and just like when I was sewing my individual pieces together, I'm going to line up all of those center seams, trying to make it as square as I can. So again, if you do not sew regularly, you might want to even put pins in between each pin that I have, but I will just try to watch as I go and keep it straight as I'm sewing. Just kind of depends on your skill level and what you feel comfortable with. All right, so we'll go back to the machine now, and we'll do a 1/4 of an inch seam all across that row. All right, one last time, we're going to press on this piece. So we just sewed this 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to flip this open and then press this seam. All right, now the entire front of the bag is done, and I'm going to repeat the same process for the entire back side. I'm going to do that off camera, so if you need to go back and review, just rewind the video until you had all the pieces laid out, and repeat that process over again until the whole back piece will be exactly like this one.